Captain Midnight.
On rewatch, Michael Scott's departure from The Office is one of those moments that feels sudden even when you know it's coming, which was maybe unavoidable. It's not like the show attempts to hide it at all. The Office gives Michael a full, deliberate send-off, one that's clearly designed to feel earned and complete. Most of Season 7 really centers around him even as he's preparing to leave, letting his departure stretch across multiple episodes. It's all very intentional. And yet, emotionally, I think it still lands as abrupt. One episode, Michael Scott is the gravitational center of this entire show, and the next he just isn't. Maybe what makes it feel a little jarring is his departure doesn't even come at the season finale. The show just kind of keeps going. For a lot of viewers, it kind of felt like the emotional heart of the series was ripped out overnight. And for years, I think that feeling has completely shaped how people talk about Michael's exit. And I know past videos on this era of The Office from me have tended to focus on its decline post-Michael, the idea that the show really lost something fundamental that it could never quite recover. But this time, I don't want to focus on that. I want to understand why Michael's actual exit and his story that leads to it works as well as it does. The moment a show loses its lead is almost always hard to deal with. For viewers, everything feels different and, let's admit, usually worse. But that reaction is kind of built in from the start and doesn't say all that much about how the show handled Michael's departure, which I think was actually really damn well. Because when you take a step back and look at Michael Scott as a character and not as a mascot for the show or as the engine of the show's comedy, just look at him as a person, or in this context, as a really well-written, mostly consistent character. He didn't just leave at a random moment. He left exactly when the narrative required him to. And while Steve Carrell leaving was a behind-the-scenes reality, the exit still works because the show had been building toward it all along. To understand why Michael was always moving towards leaving, you have to start with something that the show establishes very early and never really lets you forget. Michael doesn't want success at Dunder Mifflin. Not really. He doesn't want a bunch of money or to climb some corporate ladder and reach the top. He'll take those things when offered, but that's not where his heart is. Hell, he sticks with Dunder Mifflin even after the deposition made it perfectly clear that they don't take him seriously as a candidate for a promotion at all. Those just aren't the things that drive him. I mean, on paper, Michael is in a position that a lot of other characters on the show would love to be in. He's the regional manager. He has a title, he has authority, he has a workplace that revolves around him. Is it the best job in the world? I mean, no, Dunder Mifflin isn't exactly the Fortune 500, but compared to most other branches, the Scranton office actually does well under his management. All things considered, Michael's in a pretty cushy spot, but the office never treats his position that way. The show understands something crucial about its lead that Michael can't or won't acknowledge. His job doesn't fulfill him, it insulates him. It's a buffer between him and what he actually wants out of life, which is something his position can never deliver, even as he tries to force it as much as he can. Michael isn't reaching for professional achievement, he's looking for emotional validation, even and especially from his subordinates. The sense that he's loved and surrounded by people who won't leave him behind. Like, he wants a family, not in the metaphorical BS office sense, but in the most literal way possible. Relationships that extend beyond Dunder Mifflin's walls, in a role that's just not set up to facilitate that really at all. That's why he's obsessed with birthdays, holidays, and office parties that stretch late into the night. These things feel very personal to him in a way that his actual job, which he constantly puts off, never could. Dunder Mifflin becomes a substitute for a life he doesn't have yet, and a place where closeness can be scheduled, enforced, and kind of guaranteed. It's awful for his employees, especially in the early seasons. But once you understand where it comes from and get some glimpses of Michael's childhood and how that probably shaped him, it stops being purely cringy. It becomes sad in a way that I think elevates him to one of the best and most bittersweet sitcom leads of all time. He doesn't talk about the future in terms of growth or advancement. Like, he's not a guy who cares about having a corner office in a high-rise. When he imagines his best future, it almost always boils down to just not being alone. It's having people who choose to spend time with him because they want to, not because they have to. That desire never really changes across the series. What changes, and where he finally ends up, is slowly realizing that maybe that isn't possible in the context of The Office. Like, maybe Ryan doesn't care about him. He just wants money for woof.com in what I think is one of the key later Michael episodes. I know I've talked about this before, like check out my last video on The Office and its Halloween episode, but there's something really poignant about Michael clinging to the idea that the job can be enough, that if he commits to it fully, it will give him everything he's missing. But again and again, the show undermines that. Dunder Mifflin can give Michael structure, attention, even affection, especially when people feel bad for him, but it can't give him a life. And really, the entire show is built around that tension. I think when you consider what Michael actually values, staying forever was never an outcome that made sense. Maybe Michael's relationship with Dunder Mifflin is easy to misread on first watch because he spends so much time obsessing over the job and the company. He really personalizes it and will treat insults to the office as an insult to himself. For most of the series, that office in Scranton genuinely feels like Michael's entire world. But Dunder Mifflin only ever mattered to him when it gave him something he lacked everywhere else. A guaranteed place, a space where people had to show up 5 days a week, and where relationships had to be stable by design, so he couldn't be fully abandoned. It really provided a structure for his entire emotional life. Dunder Mifflin was, more than anything, a coping mechanism for how bleak everything outside of it seemed. I think the show does a good job of driving that home constantly, but as a boss, it's not like Michael was all that concerned with growing the company's market share unless he's forced to be. He cares about, morale and long and pointless conference room meetings that drag on forever. Now, I'm not saying Michael is indifferent to the success of the branch. The show is careful about that too. Under his leadership, like I said, the Scranton branch often performs surprisingly well. I kind of have a bone to pick with that, by the way. It's never totally made sense to me that his branch is actually doing better than the rest of them. But that being said, it's not like Michael is some hidden genius when it comes to business. In season 5, when David Wallace brings Michael in for a big picture conversation about exactly what he's doing right, Michael struggles to even explain it. Not because he's hiding something, there's really nothing to hide. There is no strategy. He's looking for something permanent in a place that most people just see as the means to a paycheck. Coworkers come and go, roles change, branches close, and as much as Michael wants it to be a family, it can't be. It's a workplace with corporate superiors that just don't value what he values. Not to mention, it's in a dying industry. So it becomes easy to describe Holly as the reason Michael leaves. She's the relationship that finally works, and The Office goes to great lengths to show how well matched they are. She's the thing that gives his exit a clear emotional shape and justification. But that also misses a little of what makes Holly different. What really sets her apart is that she's so much like Michael, but doesn't make The Office the center of her whole world. She's a version of him more comfortable in her own skin. She has a life that isn't anchored to the building or the job. So I think for the first time, Dunder Mifflin isn't the only life Michael can really imagine having. His total attachment to The Office can finally loosen because it no longer has to carry everything. The weight that was always pressing down on those relationships, demanding they be far more than they were ever set up to be. That desperation underneath every forced party and every attempt at friendship, it finally goes away, giving us the far more zen but still very goofy Michael we get in the finale. The Office, being an older show with so many episodes in a season, doesn't have to rush any of this. It builds to Michael's exit really smartly and methodically, eventually giving us something that feels well-earned and kind of inevitable. The show would keep going for a few more years, and like I said, I'm pretty harsh on those seasons. I know a lot of you like them more than I do, but even despite those issues, or whatever else happened after Steve Carrell decided not to renew his contract, I'm glad that Michael himself got to go out on such a high note, and more than that, got a character payoff that felt like they had always been building to it, taking the foibles and quirks of the character that were in the show's DNA from the very beginning, and really moving them forward, having him grow so much as a person while still remaining unmistakably Michael Scott. Alright, so if you haven't heard me say it yet, I want to get this out right up front. Nebula now has a free trial. You can sign up right now and watch every video on the platform totally free, including mine, which are completely ad-free, and explore a ton of other exclusive stuff from some of the best creators out there, including Nando V Movies, Be Kind Rewind, Patrick H. Willems, and a lot more. And if you're looking for a place to start, Lindsay Ellis just released Bluey Adults, a great new Nebula exclusive that I can't recommend enough. It takes a deep dive into how and why adults have become so invested in this Australian kids show. It's really insightful, funny, and heartfelt. I went in knowing almost nothing about Bluey beyond how huge it was, and came out actually understanding the appeal. It also takes an entertaining look at the stranger corners of the fandom. So yeah, check it out for free, see what you think, and if you end up liking what Nebula's offering, memberships are currently 50% off for annual plans, just $30 a year or about $250 a month. You can start your free trial using my link go.nebula.tv/Captain Midnight, or just scan the QR code on screen.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.